Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Busy old morning, and the papers are absolutely full of that William and Harry interview that we heard about on the news, the red tops in particular. There's the Mail on Sunday. William and Harry are agony over last phone call with Mum. Sunday Mirror, last call with Mum haunts us. The same photograph, interestingly, and the same photograph again, Sunday Express, our last words with Mummy. Sunday Times, same stories there. I still feel Mum's hugs, but they've got their own story there. Tories promote the right to choose your own sex. We'll talk about that later on. But also the other really big story of the day, there's the Sunday Telegraph splash. Revolt of the BBC women. That's the BBC and Pay, and you bet we'll be talking about that. Finally, there's the Observer. Lots of politics on the front page of the Observer. They're talking about David Davis now being the favourite to succeed Theresa May, perhaps in the autumn. And they've got a story there about Jeremy Corbyn's secret backer when he was allegedly going to be deselected by his constituency party. One Tony Blair stepped in to save him, so we'll discuss that as well. Thanks to all of you. Toby, let's start off with the BBC Pay story. When I see all the photographs there and read the list of names on this open letter, I think virtually every important female TV star in the BBC is in that. It's an absolute complete list.
Yeah, and they've got all their photographs on page 2 of the Sunday Telegraph. We also see evidence that the story is beginning to metastasise. So there's a story above that about the NHS coming under pressure to reduce the gender pay gap. And of course, we'll soon see it in other publicly funded institutions. And it won't just be the gender pay gap, it'll be the pay gap between white men and black, Asian and minority ethnic men. And then we'll see it in connection with class and so forth.
Yeah.
And I'm slightly concerned that this is going to result in a clamour for more pay from all kinds of other groups. The solution to this problem isn't to pay anyone who isn't a white, heterosexual, middle-class male more. The solution, I'm afraid, Andrew, is to pay white, middle-class, heterosexual males less.
And you say that as one of us. Treachery, treachery. Gisela, isn't the real issue, I'm thinking particularly of TV, that people like me, I've been around for a long time, and we get paid more because we've got experience and so forth. I'm a bit grizzled, going a bit weird around the edges. But if I had been born Audrey Marr rather than Andrew Marr, I would have been out 10 years ago. There's a real lack of old women on the screen anywhere.
But that we can start to address. I think I'm really much more concerned, it's not just the top pay, it's the further down you go. You always will find that women are paid just a little bit less. And we've got to start addressing this. And as Toby says, there are these extraordinary differentials. And the fact that this is now coming out, I think, will enable that kind of next generation to say, look, we're no longer putting up with this.
Anna, I would imagine that there will not be a newsroom or an office in the country tomorrow morning where this is not being talked about. And people are saying, well, what about here? How much am I paid compared to that guy?
Remember, I used to work in television as a female presenter and a reporter, so I'm absolutely aware of all of this. I think things have got worse. And I just wonder whether one of the reasons... I used to be the mother of the chapel, NUJ. So
FOC, yeah.
FOC, so father of the chapel, but I was a woman's woman. Anyway, yeah. And as the mother of the chapel, I kept a very beady eye on all the pay levels and how people were often being mistreated. And I just wonder whether or not, dare I say, the de-unionisation of many places of work. So I don't have a problem with trade unions, as long as they're democratic and as long as they're responsible. And, you know, they played an important point in making sure there was fairness, whatever your sex, colour, sexual orientation, whatever.
So this is what has happened. And into that gap, which used to be the unions negotiating, you've got agents and you've got secrecy. And that's where the problem starts.
And that's why I think this has been so important, that it is now come out. That it's much more open, and you have an awareness of what's going on. Really. I mean,
the other thing is that actually, to be fair, the women all say they know that they're very well paid. Yeah. They also talk about the disparity in the rest of the unfairness, and the rest of the BBC people not so well paid. And my other thing is we've got to keep an eye on the regions as well, because there will be regional presenters who will not be paying the same as the man sitting next door to them.
I just think that after this kind of thing happens and everyone's pay is out there, what you normally expect is that everybody turns on everybody else and a massive bickering starts. These women have stuck together, and that is very impressive, and that's why they've holding such a gun to the head of the BBC this morning.
Right.
One argument to justify the pay discrepancy is that the men are more likely to be poached by ITV than the women. Is that true in your experience, Andrew?
Yes.
Right.
Well, I don't know about the women being more like... No, I can think of... I can think of one example of a very well-regarded female presenter on the BBC who went to ITV and is now paid much, much more there. So it goes both ways. Let me turn now to the other big story of the day, which is this William and Harry interview. It's actually, I mean, I don't really go for these things, but it's very moving, isn't it?
It is. And actually, if you think about it, these were two teenagers, or almost teenagers in the case of Harry, when they lost their mother, which for any child is hugely traumatic, obviously. But things were made even worse for them. Their parents were separated, which of course adds to it all. And the fact that whilst they were trying to grieve, in many ways it was under a public spotlight, and of course with papers constantly speculating, showing scenes of where their mother had died. And I think what's refreshing, if that is the right word to use, but I think it is to find two people who are actually talking about the issue of grief in a very human way, which says a lot about now the modern royal family, for which we are very grateful, compared to, frankly, when Diana went into it at the age of 19, far too young, and a very frail and fragile character in her own right.
Maintaining our themes of BBC programmes and powerful women, Gisela Stewart, I want to go to the front page of The Observer. Hilary Armstrong, former Labour Chief Whip, has given a very interesting interview to the BBC's Westminster Hour.
Indeed, but what it says revealed Jeremy Corbyn's secret backer when chips were down was Tony Blair. I think what it actually says more...
What's the essence of the story?
The essence of the story is that when Jeremy Corbyn was under threat of being deselected by his own constituency, it was Tony Blair who said, no, we're not doing this. He said Tony Blair stepped in to rescue Corbyn from being removed as an MP when some of Corbyn's Islington North constituents wanted to deselect him. The success of New Labour was that it realised that in order to form a government, you need to be embracing, you need to bring people in. And if there was one thing which you could accuse Tony Blair of, that he always spent more time on the people who disagreed with him than actually spending time with people who supported him. And I think that is the way forward. And the Whip's office need to be all-embracing.
Unlike the hard left in the Labour Party.
I think there's a lesson here for the Conservative Party, and particularly the Conservative Cabinet. The reason Hilary Armstrong has revealed this is because she's worried about deselection taking place within the present Parliamentary Labour Party, and she wants to discourage Jeremy Corbyn from allowing that to happen. Of course, he will allow it to happen, and the argument for the Conservatives is, hang on if you possibly can, because in due course, civil war will erupt in the Labour Party.
Absolutely
Gender reassignment.
Indeed. There's a story...
He said firmly.
Was that an order?
It was. Absolutely.
The answer is no. Tories promote right to choose your own sex. I think that's a very important story. Adults will be able to change their gender legally without a doctor's diagnosis under government plans that will transform British society. Sunday Times story. The important thing in that consultation process, which they've announced for the autumn, I think is that they have to think through the consequences of this, whether it is different retirement age, because at the moment, whilst we have got the possibility to gender reassignment, if you were born a man and now woman...
That is very interesting. If I decided I was going to declare myself a woman, I could retire earlier.
And that would make you the highest paid female employee of the BBC.
Double whammy. Double whammy.
But isn't it extraordinary?
Nobody's going to be doing that to get a better pension.
All the stories at the moment are on about how men might be doing things which currently only women can do, like, you know, are men going to gender reassign them in order to go to changing rooms, which is nonsense, because the key thing is this is an issue which I think is an important human rights issue. We need to get it out of medicalisation, where it's sort of seen as, you know, there's a problem with you. It is a recognition. And if Justine Greening can continue what the Labour government started, and you know, Labour politicians need to remind themselves it was Labour who really were the trailblazers.
Isn't it fascinating?
It's good.
The Education Secretary happens to be gay.
Yeah.
The Schools Minister happens to be gay, and actually that's the right attitude. Just happens to be.
Nobody ever mentions it.
I mean, wow, what a remarkable
And when I
change
came
in
into
such a
Parliament
short period
20
of
years
time.
ago, there was this assumption that nobody on the Tory benches.
Or indeed your own was gay.
Oh, no, I mean, you know,
I think
Let's move on, if we may, to another very powerful woman. An extraordinarily vivid piece by Ruth Davidson, the Scottish Tory leader, in this new website, Tim Montgomery's Unheard.
Yeah, a great piece by Ruth Davidson, who is a remarkable woman, and I hope very much one day will be a remarkable Tory leader. But she talks about capitalism, she talks about why as a system it is the right thing to do, how it enriches everybody and it delivers on social justice as well as Conservatives, and she's talking about taking the fight quite properly to the Labour Party.
But she says, how can you sell capitalism to somebody in a pit village with no pit,
And
or a steel town with no steel mill, or a factory town with no factories?
We have stopped making the argument, and we stopped telling people what conservatism is all about, and we've allowed also the Labour Party, the hard left in particular, to take the agenda that they have a monopoly on caring about people. I don't want poverty. That's one of the reasons I came into politics, was for the abolition of poverty. What distinguishes us largely is how we achieve it, and she makes the case for capitalism as being the deliverer of social justice as well as a better economy.
This is all being wrapped up by some people as Ruth Davidson's leadership bid, but this seems to be total piffle because she's inside the Scottish Parliament,
and
not the Westminster Parliament, and appears to have no intention of moving.
She's very clear. She says, I want to be Scotland's First Minister, and all credit to her.
But she's the kind of person you would like to be standing behind as leader one day.
One day, undoubtedly.
All right.
She's outstanding woman.
It's a great piece, and it's exactly the kind of conversation that needs to be taking place within the Conservative Party. Whoever the next leader is, they have to take the fight to Labour, defend capitalism against socialism, but also at the same time acknowledge that there are some problems with capitalism that need addressing.
Absolutely.
Right. Toby, you've got another Labour story, I think, that we're turning to.
Yes, in the Mail on Sunday, there's a story about how Justine Greening, who is clearly making the news this morning, has written a letter to Angela Rayner demanding an apology for Labour's misleading of students during the general election campaign by strongly implying, OK, not promising, but strongly implying that they would do something to deal with student debt, not just stop people from having to pay, but also deal with the debt run up by those who've actually paid. Over £100 billion we're talking about. Of course, this is something they've rode back on, John McDonnell last week, and Justine Green, I think, is rightly asking Labour to apologise for misleading young people on this particular issue.
Now, I have to make promises on this show about who can talk about what, and I promised Gisela that she'd be able to talk about pop-up parliaments. And I'm going to keep my promise, Gisela.
Thank you very much. I was on the administration committee in the last House of Commons, and we looked, the parliamentary building is crumbling. The easiest way is for Parliament to decamp and have those refurbishments done as quickly as possible. And here's this, I think, amazing suggestion. Could stunning glass dome designed by genius behind the Gherkin be temporary home for the Commons? Horse Guards Parade, it's an idea. Norman Foster behind it, and I think we should cherish modern architecture and actually give it a chance, and I think that's brilliant.
Absolutely. A promise kept. Now, we're almost running out of time. I do want to talk a little bit about Brexit. I had assumed, Anna, that people like you, who are on the sort of more Remainery side of the Tory family, as it were pretty much stuffed in this new Parliament. There weren't enough of you to make any difference, whatever Labour did. But actually, because of the 5-year Parliament Act, you can carry on saying and voting as you wish without too much fear of a sudden general election. Is that right?
I think it is. Look, everything has changed after the general election. I mean, Theresa May went to the country to strengthen her hand, to increase her majority. And I think it was so that she could put into place a form of Brexit which the British people have actually rejected. Now, we're leaving the European Union. Nothing's changed on that. But the terms and the deal that we get, the rhetoric that we now use, and that end deal has completely changed.
This is all about the transition after we formally leave, is it?
It's more than that, but that is now important. See, what's happened is that the hardline Brexiteers, I think, have realised that their game is up, thank goodness for that. But also now we understand that all members of the Cabinet, except there'll be a transitional period. I want us to take what Frank Field has suggested, a lever, take the Norwegian safe harbour, as we then get a proper deal with the EU, and eventually we go into that.
Liam Fox says in an interview that's going out in a moment that he thinks it shouldn't last, that transition period, longer than the period between now and the next general election. That should be the hard cut-off. What do you think about that?
I think it should be as long as it takes for British business to get what they want. We have to put the economy and jobs at the heart of Brexit. And so that's what's happening. She's listening to business.
A really interesting argument, folks, but we're about out of time, I'm afraid. We will be carrying on talking about this for months and months ahead. But thanks very much indeed.
Time to take a look at what's on the front pages this morning. Let's start, shall we, With the Sunday Telegraph, it's reporting that more than 40 high-profile women at the BBC have written to the Director-General, Tony Hall, calling on him to act now to close the gender pay gap. The Observer says that David Davis is the preferred choice amongst Conservative Party members to replace Theresa May as leader, but Boris Johnson does still retain some support. Now, here's the Mail on Sunday. It leads with a story about Princes William and Harry, who speak of their agony on the 20th anniversary of their mother's death. The Sunday Express also has that story and features a previously unseen picture of Diana with Harry. The same picture on the front of the Sunday Mirror, which talks about the Prince's last phone call with their mother. And the Sunday Times features the plans we were hearing about before the break to make it easier for people to legally change their gender. And well, to talk about all of that, we're joined by the Mail on Sunday columnist Dan Hodges, tech entrepreneur Emma Sinclair, and former spokesperson for Jeremy Corbyn, Matt Zarb-Cousin. Morning to all of you. Let's dive straight on in. And Dan, just to mix things up a little bit, you're talking about a story in The Observer about the Tory leadership.
Yeah, we've got, surprise, surprise, we've got a bit of leadership speculation. I mean, actually, I think we're kind of coming to we're at the end of the beginning of this. Obviously, we've got to the summer. We've had all the various candidates have sort of had their names thrown into the ring. But, you know, the reality is Theresa May has made it to the summer. And I think what's interesting about this is it goes through the various sort of runners and riders, but there is an interesting figure in here amongst Tory members, which say actually 77% of Tory members want Theresa May to remain, at least into the short term. And I think that is the real story. She's not going to be going anywhere for the foreseeable future. What is also interesting as well, though, is when you look at the figures, you've got about 20% back David Davis, 17% back Boris, but then in third place on 6% is Jacob Rees-Mogg, and there has been. We were talking about this this off air. I mean, there's been a little bit of Mogg mania around.
Yeah, you'd get some decent odds on him.
Normally, you would sit here and you would say that is ridiculous. But as we were saying, there are no fundamentals in British politics at the moment, and you simply can't rule him out.
I mean, he's been very human, and it's made all of us engage with him.
I mean, Liam Fox says that Theresa May is going to be Prime Minister till the leader of the Conservative Party, Prime Minister till 2022. None of us believe that, do we?
I think that they'd be absolutely mad to call a leadership contest this year. I mean, they've invoked Article 50. They've had a general election in their party's interest, not in the national interest, and then to now have a leadership contest just because Theresa May is a drag on her party, it would be transparently putting the party first. And I think the British people wouldn't really forgive the Conservative Party after that. This is the most important negotiations this country's ever had, arguably, and they need to get on with it.
Emma, take us to the front page of the Sunday Times and the story that we've been speaking to Justine Greening about, the right now to choose your own gender, but without sorry, Matt, this is your story, but this is without having to have a medical to confirm that you are on that journey.
Yeah, it's a very archaic system we have at the moment where you have to be medically diagnosed with gender dysphoria and live as the gender you want to be for 2 years before you're legally entitled to change your birth certificate. And Jeremy Corbyn said earlier in the week that he would support the Conservatives if they moved to modernise the legislation. And obviously this is very welcome from the Conservatives now.
I sometimes feel that I'm kind of slightly behind the curve on these things. It almost feels that there's a conversation, a national conversation that's been had about this issue that I've somehow missed. Am I the only one?
I think that's right. I think the reason for that is obviously the pace of progress in these issues is in a sense accelerating. Now, I think to be perfectly honest, we would be lying if we said everybody in the country is comfortable with this conversation. There are obviously a number of people who are going to find these issues very challenging, but it is just a sign of where we're going now. Not just that we're having the conversation, not that this legislation is being moved forward by a Conservative government, actually proposed by a Conservative government, but also if you look at the ministers who are leading it, Justine Greening. And Nick Gibbs, the Equalities Minister, got an article in our paper this morning with a very powerful article. They're both gay themselves, and that's just a sign of how far we've come on this.
Emma, is gender a matter of choice?
Apparently it isn't. So, we have to be fair with everybody. which of course touches on the story that I'm going to talk about this morning as well.
Yeah, well, let's head on to that, the BBC gender pay gap. You know, we should obviously say that, you know, across the industry and across many industries, there remains this issue of women being underpaid compared to their male colleagues. But the BBC does rather look to have been caught out here, don't they?
Well, I mean, it's a shame you have to name and shame. And as we've touched on a few areas, issues of societal discrimination are just no longer OK. And the BBC is a public service and has a duty to advance equality. It's just a shame that they've also said that they'll address this by 2020, and we're now, you know, we're halfway through 2017, and it's clearly been on the corporate agenda for quite some time.
Well, they know the salaries that they pay to their senior staff. They know where there is a difference between if two people are working on the same programme.
Indeed, you know, and it's also, in some ways, it's a shame for the BBC because this is an issue that is pervasive in almost every large institution. If you look at the statistics, you know, women are. You know, this is the week where I feel like we saw the title would be "Women the same as men, only cheaper." I mean, that's what I really feel has happened this week. And I hope that it's made everybody at the top of all organisations realise that it's no longer acceptable and needs addressing immediately.
Well, let's move on to our last story from the Observer front page. Interesting little detail this, that Tony Blair acted to protect Jeremy Corbyn during his long tenure as an elected representative.
Yeah, but it's kind of how times change. So the story is that activists in Jeremy Corbyn's constituency went to Hillary Armstrong and said we want to move against Jeremy Corbyn, and the message came back, no, if you do that you won't be backed by Tony because he doesn't think that's appropriate, and let's be honest, because he didn't think really Jeremy Corbyn represented much of a political problem at that time. More fool him, frankly.
I think I think this looks to me like a bit of a rewriting of history. I think a lot of perhaps MPs are worried about reselections.
I wonder why that is.
I personally think that there should be an element of democratic accountability to party members.
Well, that's the argument that we've heard from Jeremy Corbyn elsewhere this morning and Barry Gardiner on this programme, the idea that it's up to the members. But it does look somewhat hypocritical to have spent almost your entire parliamentary career in opposition to the party leadership and then demand fealty once you take the leadership.
But he's accountable to his constituency Labour Party, and there were moves to deselect Jeremy Corbyn, and they weren't successful because his members locally were happy with the job that he was doing. In fact, Hillary Armstrong wrote an article in the Telegraph in 2004. There was a rumour that they were going to put MPs in front of the National Executive Committee, and if they weren't loyal, then they would deselect them. And that was actually written by Toby Helm, which is the political editor of The Observer now.
But the point is, it didn't happen then, did it? I mean, it didn't happen, and Tony Blair did step in. And you know, Jeremy Corbyn has been consistently asked, was asked again today, consistently asked, will you stand up and speak out against the deselection threat? And he keeps refusing to do so. And we know why he refuses to do so, because he wants to have the deselection threat, because he wants it as a way of bullying his MPs into line.
I prefer the term closed primaries than deselection.
Exactly.
Another reason why politics...
Barry Gardiner told me that we're in for a summer of unity, something for us all to look forward to. Many thanks, all of you, for joining us to take us through the papers this morning.